Claire Ellis stood by the flower-decorated staircase of the grand hall, wishing she could turn invisible. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume. Laughter and chatter flowed across the room, along with the tinkling of champagne glasses. Her sister Olivia's engagement party was a dream for most people, but a quiet nightmare for her. Claire had come because her mother had begged her to. Everyone expected the entire Ellis family to attend, even if they did not belong among the rich guests. Claire tried to keep her face calm. She wore a plain navy dress she had borrowed from her friend and held a small purse that looked too simple next to all the glitter around her. Olivia looked beautiful and shining as she walked through the crowd on her fiancé's arm. People kept praising her, saying she had a perfect catch and perfect life. Claire stood at the side near the buffet, trying not to get noticed. She did not want to be in any of the photographs or the endless conversations about designer dresses and wedding plans. She was proud of her sister, but every time someone said how lucky Olivia was, Claire felt a pinch inside her chest. She worked hard at a small design studio, earned just enough to pay rent and bills, and had stopped caring about fitting into her sister's world. One of Olivia's friends, a tall woman with too much jewelry, turned to Claire and frowned. She handed her an empty glass and said in a sharp voice, "Please get me another rose." People nearby looked up. Someone laughed quietly. Claire understood that they thought she worked there. His humiliation burned hot behind her calm smile. For a moment she thought about correcting the woman, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she took the glass and placed it back on a waiter's tray as he passed. The group laughed again, whispering behind fans and napkins. Claire's cheeks flushed red, but she kept her back straight. Her mother stood across the room talking to Olivia's future in-laws and did not notice what had happened. Her father had stepped outside for some air. There was no one to step in or speak up for her. The band started playing a lively tune. Guests clapped. Champagne fizzed in crystal flutes. Claire suddenly felt small, like she didn't belong in this place where money ruled everything. She told herself it didn't matter, that she had survived worse. She walked toward the far corner near a tall window where golden light fell across the floor. From there she could watch without being noticed. Near the bar, she saw a man watching her. He was tall, wearing a simple dark suit that looked expensive but not flashy. He wasn't laughing like the others. His gaze followed her with quiet curiosity. She looked away, pretending to study the roses on a table. A young waiter handed her a glass of water with a kind smile and said, "It can get rough with all those fancy people." She thanked him and felt a little better. The water was cool and clear and helped wash away the bitter taste in her chest. Across the room, Olivia kept shining like a star, her fiancé's arm around her waist. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted for a toast. Champagne bubbled and spilled onto the marble floor. Claire could have slipped out quietly, gone home and hidden under her blanket. But something in her decided to stay. Maybe she had to face this kind of night to prove she could survive it. People whispered again, pointing her way. She held her head high and remembered her small studio filled with sketches and colors. That was her real world, built by her own effort. No one could take that from her. The night dragged on, and the air grew heavy with perfume and heat. Music swelled as couples began to dance. Claire stood at the edge, trying not to feel out of place. The man in the dark suit spoke briefly to the host and then moved through the crowd. She saw him glance her way once more before he turned to help an elderly woman with her chair. His quiet manner seemed different from the boastful style of the other guests. For the first time in the evening, Claire felt someone had noticed her without judgment. Still, when another guest mistook her for a member of the staff and asked for a napkin, the sting returned sharper than before. She handed one over and walked away toward the doorway that led to a side corridor. The laughter behind her sounded distant. Somewhere in her mind, a small voice whispered that she did not belong there, but another voice told her she didn't need their approval. Outside that hall, she was still Claire Ellis, the woman who created beauty from pencil and paper, not from money or fame. As the band struck another high note and people cheered, Claire leaned against the cool wall of the hallway and took a deep breath. The evening had gone on long enough, yet something told her that, strange as it seemed, her story at this awful party was not over. Something was about to happen that would change the way everyone saw her, including herself. Matthew Roberts stood near the tall windows of the mansion, watching the guests move like shining pieces in a game he did not enjoy. The chandeliers threw golden light on faces that smiled too quickly. He had come because the father of Olivia's fiancée wanted to discuss a business merger. It was supposed to be a quiet conversation between powerful men. Yet Matthew found himself lost in a crowd of people who cared only about money, attention, and the next glass of champagne. He was used to such gatherings, but tonight something felt empty, as if every voice in the room spoke the same shallow language that tired him. His attention shifted when he noticed a woman standing near the edge of the crowd. Her dress was plain, her posture straight. She carried a small purse rather than a sparkling clutch. Something about her calm face and silent eyes caught him. Most guests behaved as if the night existed only for them, but she looked like she was trying to disappear. When one guest laughed at her and handed her an empty glass, Matthew watched her reaction carefully. The woman took the insult quietly, but there was strength in the way she placed the glass aside and did not argue. That quiet strength interested him far more than the noisy pride of everyone else in the hall. The host found him after a while, pulling him into a short conversation about investments and projects. Matthew answered politely, yet inside his mind he kept thinking about the young woman with the navy dress who had vanished down a side corridor. He soon excused himself from the talk and decided to walk toward the hallway. The music from the main hall grew softer as he stepped away. In that quieter space, he saw her again, standing near a window and staring outside into the dark garden. Claire turned when she heard footsteps behind her. She recognized the man who had been watching her earlier. His calm presence filled the small hallway. "Are you hiding from the party too?" he asked with an easy tone. She gave a small smile and said she just wanted a bit of air. He nodded, as if he understood completely. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. The distant sound of music drifted in from the ballroom.
Ow.
When he finally introduced himself as Matthew Roberts, she replied simply, "Claire Ellis." The name seemed to surprise him, but he only smiled and said it was nice to meet her. Matthew observed her more closely now. Up close, she looked nothing like the proud guests inside. Her eyes showed thought rather than vanity.
He asked if she was enjoying the evening. She said she would rather be home with a cup of tea and a book. Her honesty made him laugh softly. Most people at these events tried to impress him without knowing who he was, but she spoke as if she had nothing to prove. Her words felt refreshing. They started to talk. She asked him what brought him to the engagement party. He gave a vague answer, saying he was only an invited guest, connected to the business side of the groom's family. She asked nothing more. Instead, she spoke about how odd it felt to watch her sister surrounded by so much luxury. She said it was strange to feel proud and invisible at the same time. Her voice did not sound bitter, only truthful. Matthew listened with quiet interest. He had met countless people who pretended their lives were perfect. This woman was real in a way that unsettled him. A breeze slipped through the half-open window.
Outside.
Garden lights glowed softly on the trimmed bushes and pathways. Claire turned to look at them, her hair moving slightly in the air. Matthew felt something stir inside him that had nothing to do with business or status. He wanted to know more about the woman who could stand alone in a hall full of wealthy guests and still look dignified. He asked about her work, and she told him she was a designer, running a small local studio. Her tone carried pride without arrogance. He could tell she was not someone who measured success in money. When laughter rose again from the ballroom, Claire sighed and said she should probably go back before her mother noticed she had disappeared. Matthew said quietly that she should not let anyone there decide her worth. She glanced at him with surprise, as if she had not expected such words from a stranger. For a moment their eyes met, and both of them held that look longer than they meant to. It felt like an unspoken recognition between people from very different sides of the world. She thanked him for the kind words and began to walk back to the hall. He followed slowly, stopping near the doorway to watch her blend again with the crowd. The light touched her hair, and the noise swallowed her figure, yet he could not forget her calm strength. He had attended hundreds of events, but never before had he walked away thinking of a single person so intently. As the evening went on, he stayed near the corner of the hall, pretending to check his phone while his eyes searched for her again. She had no idea who he really was, and for the first time in years, Matthew Roberts liked it that way. The party moved into its loudest hour. Guests filled the ballroom, dancing under the chandeliers. The air smelled of wine and perfume. Claire felt her head spinning from the noise and laughter. She slipped quietly through a side door that led to the garden. The change was sudden and peaceful. The night air was cool and fresh after the heavy room inside. Moonlight spread across the small pond and glittered on the surface of the water. A fountain whispered under the stars. Claire took a deep breath and removed her heels, holding them by the straps as she stepped barefoot onto the stone path. Her feet finally relaxed on the cool ground. She felt free for the first time that evening. She found a bench near a rose bush and sat down. The roses gave off a soft scent, and she smiled for the first time that night. She thought about her sister and how different their lives had become. Olivia had always been the center of attention. Claire had learned to stand in the background quietly, doing her drawing, designing clothes, finding her own purpose. She did not hate her sister, but she did envy her confidence. Tonight had shown her again that people would always notice Olivia first and forget about her. Still, she told herself that she would not be ashamed of who she was. A sound of footsteps came from the doorway behind her. Claire turned her head and saw Matthew walking toward her. His jacket was open, and he carried 2 glasses of water. He smiled and asked if she minded company. She said no, and made room on the bench. He handed her 1 glass and sat beside her. The silence between them was quiet, but not tense. The fountain kept its soft rhythm, and crickets sang in the grass. Matthew asked if she had come outside to escape the party too. Claire nodded. She said she enjoyed peace more than crowds. He laughed lightly and said he felt the same. She asked if he often went to such parties. Said he had to attend many because of his work, though he rarely liked them. Claire was curious, but did not ask what his work was. Seemed grateful for that. Instead, they talked about simple things. She told him how she loved to draw gardens like this, full of detail and quiet. He asked her if she had always liked art. She said yes since childhood, though she had never gone to a famous college or received big awards. She worked for her small clients, and was proud of that. The talk slowly became more open. Matthew spoke about how he had grown tired of people trying to impress him. They both agreed that honesty was better than show. Claire felt comfortable with him, which surprised her. Usually she stayed guarded with strangers, especially at events like this. But Matthew asked questions that showed genuine interest. He seemed to see her as more than part of the crowd. Under the pale light, his face looked calm, his eyes steady. The world around them faded into quiet comfort. Claire told him about being mistaken for a server earlier. She laughed at herself, trying to make it sound small.
Matthew
Did not laugh. He said simply that people too quick to judge others often miss the most important things. His voice carried heat that surprised her. She saw in his expression that the moment earlier in the hall had troubled him too. For the first time that evening, Claire no longer felt alone. The shame she had carried began to ease. She sipped her water and whispered, "Thank you." It was a small word, but it carried real meaning. For a long moment they sat still. The wind moved through the trees and brought soft rustling sounds. Lights from the mansion glowed through the tall windows, but out here everything felt different. Claire looked up at the stars, and Matthew followed her gaze. He asked what she wished for when she saw a star. She said she wished to build something lasting through her own work, not through someone else's name. He said that was a strong wish, and that anyone who spoke with that kind of heart deserved every bit of success. They exchanged smiles that reached their eyes. Claire felt warmth rising on her cheeks. She asked if he would tell her more about his life. Matthew hesitated for a moment, and then said he managed a few companies. He kept the tone light, not wanting to mention the full scale of his career. She nodded, not pressing for more, which made him admire her even more. In her silence, he found peace he rarely felt with anyone else. When voices called for another toast inside, Claire sighed and said she had to return before Olivia noticed her absence. Matthew stood with her, offering his hand to help her up. She took it and felt a strange pull in her chest, something calm yet strong. She slipped her heels back on and thanked him for the water and the talk. He said it was the best conversation he had all evening. As she walked toward the door, he stayed behind in the garden for a while, staring at the spot where she had sat. He could not explain why meeting her had left him feeling changed. The moon hung low above the mansion, shining silently as if it had seen everything. The next morning began with sunlight pouring through the curtains of the Ellis family home. Claire was sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee, trying to clear her thoughts. She had hardly slept. Her mind kept replaying the quiet talk in the garden with Matthew. Every time she remembered his voice or the kind look in his eyes, Her heart gave a small stir. She told herself not to read too much into it. He was probably just being polite. People like him were used to making others feel special for an hour, then forgetting them. Still, she could not shake the feeling that their meeting had meant something different. Her phone buzzed on the table. She froze when she saw the notification. Photos from the engagement party had started spreading online. There was one picture that made her blink in shock. It showed her and Matthew in the garden, sitting close together, faces turned toward one another under the lights. The caption read, "Mystery woman steals attention from the party as billionaire guest watches her closely." She quickly scrolled down and saw comments filled with speculation and sarcasm. Some called her bold, others called her desperate. Her chest tightened with fear and anger. Billionaire guest. Was that who Matthew really was? Before she could think, Olivia stormed into the kitchen holding her phone. Her hair was messy and her expression sharp. "Claire, what on earth is this?" she demanded, shoving the screen toward her. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. People are asking if my sister is chasing rich men at my engagement." Claire tried to explain that nothing like that had happened, that she had only talked to him after stepping outside for air. But Olivia would not listen. Their mother walked in too, her face pale. She had already received calls from relatives. The house filled with angry voices. Claire wanted to disappear. She went to her room and sat on her bed, staring at the wall. Her phone began ringing again. She did not recognize the number, but answered anyway. A man's voice said politely, "Miss Ellis, this is from the office of Mr. Matthew Roberts. He wishes to speak with you." Claire felt her throat tighten. She almost hung up, but the caller said he would call again later. So it was true. Matthew was a billionaire, one of the most talked-about businessmen in the country. The man she had shared water with in the garden was the same one whose name appeared in magazines and company headlines. It felt unreal. Matthew had seen the news too. The assistant had shown him the headlines early that morning, and he immediately remembered the garden, her clear eyes, the calm sound of her voice. He felt protective anger when he saw how the media had twisted a simple meeting into gossip. Usually he ignored this kind of attention, but now it involved someone who had trusted him for one honest conversation. He decided to visit her and explain before things grew worse. That afternoon, when Claire opened the door, she found Matthew standing there in a plain shirt and jeans, without his usual polished image. For a moment she was too startled to speak. He began by saying he was sorry. He explained that he had not told her about his position because he had wanted a real conversation without titles and money between them. He said he never imagined their short meeting would attract such noise. Claire listened, crossing her arms tightly. She asked if the whole night had been some kind of game for him. His voice was steady as he said it meant far more than that. Her anger softened, but the pain stayed. "You should have told me," she said. "Now everyone thinks I was trying to catch your attention on purpose." He nodded, saying she had every right to be upset. He offered to speak publicly and clear her name, but she shook her head. She wanted the story to fade, not to grow bigger. What she needed was not a rescue. She needed peace. Matthew respected that, though it left him troubled to see her hurt. Before leaving, he said quietly that he admired her courage and that she should not let people's opinions stop her from doing what she loved. Something in his tone made her believe he meant it deeply. When he left, the silence in the house felt heavy, but not hopeless. Claire sat again by the window, watching his car drive away. Part of her heart wanted to trust him, but another part warned her that his world was too far from hers. Over the next few days, the story slowed down as new gossip replaced it. Olivia calmed down, but the distance between the sisters remained. Claire focused on her design work, trying to ground herself. Late one evening, she received a letter in the mail with no return name, only her address neatly written on the front. Inside was a simple card that said, "Do not let their noise steal your light." She recognized the careful handwriting at once. There was no signature. Only a small charm lay enclosed, shaped like a star. Holding it in her palm, Claire felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. Maybe she and Matthew lived in different worlds, yet something bound them more deeply than titles or circumstance. She placed the charm by her desk where she worked on sketches late at night. The next time she dipped her pen in ink, she smiled slightly and began to draw. Months passed and spring brought color back into the city. Claire's small design studio began to grow slowly. Her work had started to reach people who appreciated her ideas. She found herself busy, but happy. The pain from that strange night at the engagement party had softened. The gossip had faded away, replaced by new stories that no longer had her name. Olivia's wedding was approaching, and though they still kept a bit of distance, Claire and her sister had begun to speak more kindly again. Her parents stopped worrying too. It seemed life was moving back to a calm rhythm. Yet sometimes when Claire stayed late at her studio, she thought about Matthew. She wondered if he had meant to keep in touch, or if he had decided to leave her world behind. She still had the little star charm he had sent quietly through that unsigned card. It stayed on her desk beside her pencils, shining faintly under the lamp each night. When she looked at it, she felt a strange mix of peace and longing. She never told anyone about it. It was her silent secret. One warm afternoon, Claire sat in her studio sketching a new set of designs for an upcoming local exhibition.
Ow.
The walls were covered with fabric samples and pinned drawings. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She called for the visitor to come in, expecting one of her clients. When the door opened, her breath caught. Matthew stood there with a gentle smile. He looked different than before, more relaxed and dressed simply, yet his presence filled the room in the same steady way she remembered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Claire put her pencil down and stood up. "How did you find me?" she asked. He said he had seen her work featured in a small online article about young designers in the city. He smiled as he said he wanted to see the person behind those beautiful patterns again. Claire felt both nervous and relieved. She invited him to sit. He looked around the room, his eyes moving over her sketches and materials with quiet admiration. "Made this from nothing," he said. "Built this place with your heart." She thanked him softly. They talked while the sunlight from the window fell across the table. Matthew told her he had taken a step back from some of his company roles. Said he had realized success without purpose felt empty. He wanted to invest in things that created value for people, not just profit. Claire listened with interest. When he mentioned that her designs had inspired him to think differently about creativity and meaning, she blushed. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a short proposal offering support for her studio. With no conditions other than that, she stayed in charge of her art. She looked at him uncertainly. He said gently that he did not expect gratitude or agreement right away. He only wanted her to know he believed in her talent. Claire felt tears press at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She told him she could never accept help just because of kindness. Matthias said that was exactly why he admired her, because she wanted to stand on her own. He suggested partnership, not charity. She would remain the owner. He would simply provide resources to grow her reach. After a moment of thought, she agreed that they could discuss it further. His eyes lit with quiet pride. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic promise, only understanding between them. Weeks later, the exhibition opened in a community gallery. The venue was small, but filled with warm light and colorful fabrics hanging on gentle threads. Visitors moved from piece to piece, admiring her work. Claire stood greeting them with calm joy. When she turned, she saw Matthew entering through the doorway, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. He looked proud but not possessive. Olivia was there too, smiling at her sister with genuine affection. For once, Claire felt seen not as someone else's shadow, but as her own person. As the evening continued, Matthew stepped close and told her the pieces were beautiful. She thanked him and said the night finally felt like hers. He said quietly that it always was. When the crowd cheered for her short speech, she looked out across the room, filled with light and color, and realized that life had brought her to this moment with every stumble and heartbreak leading her here. After the exhibition closed, they walked out together under the cool night sky. The street was quiet, except for the soft hum of cars in the distance. Matthew asked where she wanted to go from here. Claire looked ahead and said she wanted to keep creating, building something real from her dreams. He smiled and said he wanted to walk beside her if she would let him. She did not answer with words, but reached out her hand. He took it, and they walked on, steady and unhurried. Two paths finally joined. The night deepened around them, but in that moment, it held more light than any ballroom ever could.